We can move on, Keith, and we'll talk about Chelsea. Now, it looks like, Keith, they have sold 1/5 of their training ground in Cobham to their owners. What were your thoughts on that news? And after we discussed in previous weeks about this sort of ongoing saga, that it actually looks like they've only sold a fifth rather than the entirety of it?
Yeah, I understand that. And when I looked at the documents involved, it does sort of say that the piece that's sold internally within their companies is also Greenbelt. And this is where I raised the point previously that the only real way you can see such an increase in value, although I haven't seen that detail yet in terms of the documents, would be that if there was different planning permission to go from Greenbelt into residential or commercial. So we'll have to see what value they've really assigned to this. And then the question will be, is that the correct valuation? It certainly is a pretty complex behind the scenes transaction, and it's growing arms and legs in terms of how it's been handled. You've got to believe, though, that Todd Boehly and his boys know what they're doing. They've probably got the best law firms there are. So it's just questions at the moment more than anything else. So it certainly doesn't seem right in some way, but we'll have to wait and see till the facts come out. I'm quite prepared to look at that and see that things could be okay, but certainly the fact from Greenbelt in planning permission does seem to raise the question about how can a valuation be so high.
Could there be any repercussions, Keith, if the details come out, the documents come out, and it looks like they've sort of fallen foul of the rules? What could we expect for them potentially if they are to be sanctioned?
Well, this is all about trying to avoid a PSR points deduction. And so, of course, the obvious thing would be if the evaluations that they put on there aren't allowed, then they could fail PSR and go through the same process of having points deducted. That's the simplicity of it all. We've got to see where we end up with this one. But as I say, there's some very expensive white glove lawyers involved in this one. So you'd hope that Todd Boehly's getting his money's worth. And that they're on the right side of this. It still is leaving a bit of a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths at the moment, though. But if they're within the rules, hey, fair play.
And Keith, I know we discussed their hotel before. We're now talking about their training ground. Do you think this is a sort of a deal Chelsea could replicate in the future to avoid PSR breaches? Are there other assets potentially they could sell effectively to themselves to avoid a PSR breach?
Well, obviously, if clubs genuinely own the assets, then it could be. But I think that you're seeing the Premier League is probably the outlier in terms of this. The EFL and UEFA even wouldn't allow these sort of transactions. So I wouldn't be surprised to see the Premier League close this little loophole in the coming months. I don't know whether it will be discussed at the summer meeting. I wouldn't be surprised if it is. But I think certainly the Premier League would find that they want to try and be in line with UEFA and the EFL on this one and stop this sort of practice, because it does seem like a way around things rather than actually complying with the letter of the law.
And are there other clubs, Keith, potentially who could do similar transactions, do you think, to potentially avoid PSR or FFP breaches in the future?
Well, most clubs would have some sort of property assets that they can do that with. It's yet to be seen how creative it is. And if this loophole gets closed, then, as I say, which is what I would expect, then I think that practice is going to have to stop. It's a difficult one. I mean, you're really basically just, I think swapping assets between intercompanies is not really fair. And I do think that loophole will be closed. So I think this practice may be coming to an end.
And looking on the field, Keith, how would you rate Chelsea's season? And do you think that it was a success under Pochettino? Has it sort of been a regress from where they were? Where do you think the owners will stand about their season?
It's been very interesting, isn't it, to see how the Pochettino situation apparently had dinner on Friday night with Todd Boehly, but yet they apparently didn't discuss the future, which seems very strange to me that they wouldn't have got round to that at some stage. I personally think, look, he finished strong. I think it shows that what a bit of stability can do. I think stability is what they need. I think they need a little bit more experience. But to finish where they did, nobody would have expected that even 6-7 weeks ago. So they did finish pretty strong. And I think I mentioned before that stability for me is the key. And with Chelsea, I think another season with Pochettino may reap rewards for them. I think to change again would be very dangerous. And I think they've really got to take their foot off the managerial change gas and get back to just supporting him and trying to have a quiet time and let him also perhaps get a couple of experienced players in to help mould the squad and see if they can at least sustain sixth and then move on. Don't forget they're going to have a very serious Thursday Sunday routine this next season, so you're going to need the squad for that as well, and it does need experience to handle that sort of situation. So I think another managerial change would be almost suicidal. But then again, I'm not signing the checks.
And should their fans be concerned, Keith, going into the sort of the transfer window now? We know about June the 30th, those deadlines that are coming up. Are we expecting sales from Stamford Bridge, do you think?
Definitely. I think there will be. I think I mentioned that I thought they'd already been down to Saudi. A couple of deals might have been done. I see Thiago Silva's gone, of course, and that was certainly something off the wage bill. Look, I think there will be some movement, but now at least Pochettino, again, another reason for him to stay is that he's had a chance to evaluate the squad. He's worked with the players. He knows who he'd be happy with to go. And so I think you've got to allow him to start building the squad in his own image. But yes, I do think there will be movement at Stamford Bridge this summer, and I think fairly quickly as well.
How many sales do we reckon, Keith? Do we think it could be a number of big stars? Could it be one big star to get them over the sort of the FFP mark? How many would we anticipate potentially out of Stamford Bridge?
I've evaluated. I think there's going to be 4 moves from the first team squad, which is a fair amount given the stability that they've they've tried to create. But I think another 4 would be about what we're going to get, and who they are yet will depend on the market. Now, there's going to be a lot of the thing is a lot of clubs right now are going to be looking at PSR, thinking about getting close to it or not, and so therefore the market's going to be very interesting this year in terms of players. The buyer is going to be king, and those with the cash will be the king that can actually call the tunes and get some decent deals. I don't think there's going to be a lot of major inflation in the transfer window. It's going to dictate the player's age. Will, as usual, will be a key factor. But I think Chelsea will. I think four is the number I'm thinking about right now.
Okay. And generally for Chelsea then, Keith, what should their aims be for next season? As you kind of said, where they finished and sort of looking ahead with Pochettino, if he is to stay, is a top 4 finish plausible? Could we see them reach the top 5? Is silverware sort of the aim? Where do you think Chelsea will stand from that perspective?
Well, if we're finishing 6th, then you've got to at least consolidate to be in the top 6, and you'd want really to have that little edge to push into the top 4. I do think it's going to be a very competitive league next year in terms of those positions. I think the top 10 is going to be a very, very competitive area. I think Chelsea, though, as I say, with the Thursday, Sunday is always that little wrinkle in my mind that worries me when clubs have to go through that routine. But I think they've, as I say, consolidate European positions, and I think they've got a chance to push on. They should be in the top 4, is what I'd expect if they can really get that stability together.